Evening, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of our Impromptu Presentation Mastery course. And as always, I'm super grateful to everyone who has stayed committed to this journey. How are we all doing? How did our days go? In as much as we might not be taking live feedback as to how we are all doing and how our day went, but I'm pretty sure we all had a great day, right? Welcome to day 2 of our Impromptu Presentation Mastery course. And today we're going to be looking at something interesting. But before then, I don't know, I want to ask a few persons, right? How has it been so far? How has your learning experience been? Hope you've been learning something, right? Please, if you want to share a live feedback as to how your experience has been, kindly, I'm going to add everyone to stage so that everyone can have access to speak. Okay, so if you want to share a live feedback as to how your experience has been, kindly unmute yourself and tell us your name and your experience so far before we get into today's class. Thank you very much. Anybody can take the mic. Thank you. Okay, well, I do believe that this is close of work for some persons, and a couple of us might still be on the road or on our way home. So I'm going to ask this question again. But for now, let's get into today's class. All right. So as always, we are looking at impromptu presentation mastery. And today we would be learning something titled Thinking Fast Under Pressure. Right. How to think fast under pressure. Now, last week, we laid a foundation as to who we are and what we do at the Law Academy. Our last class, we talked about, you know, understanding impromptu presentation. Our last class was focused on understanding impromptu presentation. We looked at a few frameworks, and today we are going to be looking at how to think fast under pressure. And I know that sometime last week we also talked about pressure and how to manage pressure, but we didn't really talk about how to think fast under pressure, because at the end of the day, impromptu presentation always comes with its own share of pressure, right? And sometimes we always, are at that spot where we are trying to figure out, what do I say, what am I going to say now, and all of that. So today we're going to be looking at how to think fast under pressure. I don't know if anybody can help us, right? What is pressure? Have you been under any form of pressure point where you needed to think very fast and get your thoughts out there, right? Please, if you can help us, kindly unmute yourself and tell us a few experience that you've had, right? Can you share a few experience that you've had about how to think fast under pressure? Anybody wants to help us? Is there anyone? Have you had any experience where you needed to think fast under pressure? Mr. Demola, good evening. How are you doing? Please, as always, kindly drop your name in the chat box, all right? Because of our attendance, although we're supposed to also send a link to the attendance so that everyone can fill up the attendance and have that data at our back end, because it's very important to us that we get the data of the persons who stay committed to coming to class, because a huge part of your certificate is largely dependent on how many times you showed up in class, right? A huge part of you getting your certificate is largely dependent on how well you were able to show up in class. All right, so please do not forget to drop your name in the chat box. Good evening, Mr. Ademola. Good evening, Ezike Chinemirim. Good evening, Mr. Aliyu. Right, good evening to all the persons on Facebook. Please drop your name in the chat so that I can call your names as well. All right, so we are looking at thinking fast under pressure, and I was asking, have you ever been in a pressure situation where you don't know what to do, but then you just had to do something? You had to save yourself the embarrassment, right? So today we're going to be looking at thinking fast under pressure, and this topic is very dear to my heart because I believe this is the heartbeat of impromptu presentation, the ability to think fast under pressure. And beyond impromptu presentation, thinking fast under pressure becomes a core lifestyle of every professional. At one point or the other, you are required to think on your feet, right? Even if not necessarily to make a presentation, but just because you lead a team, or you're trying to sell yourself, or you're trying to market your business. Meanwhile, I'm going to share a story with us. Something happened today, very funny, right? I'm going to share that story with us as a little soft landing. So today I was home because I basically work from home, right? And for some strange reason, yesterday my generator decided to start acting funny. So I called someone to look at it. I have someone that services my gen, so I called him to look at it. And while he was looking at the gen was on for a period of time because he was trying to test what he had done. And then, my neighbor came to my door to inform me that someone was at the gate, that the person was looking for me. I was surprised because I wasn't expecting anybody. So I went to the gate to see who it was. Lo and behold, the person was at the gate and I didn't know who it was. So I had to ask the person, okay, good afternoon. How are you doing? How may I help you? And the person was like that he heard my gen running and he wanted to ask me how am I running generator, or why am I running generator in this country when there is solar. I'm like, oh, I know that there is solar. He was like, yes, that generator is more expensive to handle. That why am I running gen and all of that. At the end of the day, I figured out that he came to market himself just because he had my gen running. And it felt weird at first, but I started looking at it in the light of how marketing has really diversified. And truly, if I wanted solar, I could have literally patronized him because that was really brave. You're passing because you are a solar professional, you had someone running generator, you stopped at my gate, right, just to find out why I was running gen and why I haven't considered using solar panel. And how he sold himself was very interesting, and for some reason I even engaged in a conversation with him, which was very unlike me. But because of the tenacity it took for him to sell himself to a stranger, and not minding if I had dogs or if the compound is to carry people, but it made me understand something, that as a professional there is little or no time to prepare. Most times we're always preparing for the big things, but life presents pressure situations to us where you see what you want and you're supposed to think on your feet and know what to do immediately, right? Because here is a professional, or someone, yeah, I'll call him a professional because someone who has a certain level of expertise in any field can be called a professional, right? So for someone to walk up to a stranger, come to a stranger's house and sell his service just like that, it makes us understand that sometimes we need to learn how to go out of our way. And it also brings us into what we're talking about today, which is thinking fast under pressure. Probably before he came to knock at my gate, he contemplated a lot of things, right? What if he gets ignored? What if this person is hostile? What if he gets embarrassed or he makes a mistake and all of that? But at that instance, he wasn't even focusing on what the obstacles might be, but he was actually focused on his goal. And even looking at me as a human being and all of that, he was still able to make that presentation and to sell himself. And it made me actually, I noted it, that opportunity meeting preparedness is one of the most beautiful things that can do for us. There's never always a time to fully be prepared, but if you see any opportunity to sell yourself, please by all means do that, right? So that was a little story as to something very unique that happened in my day today. And when I think about it, or when I thought about it, I was like, this is really an impressive thing, right? To show us how much that people are willing to stretch themselves for their goals. So I said that to say that sometimes what we want doesn't really come at our comfort. It doesn't come at the comfort of our home. Sometimes we have to step out, because he was literally passing my gate, and then he just decided to come and market himself to a stranger, right? So this is him thinking fast under pressure. What do I say? How do I sell this thing? And if I genuinely needed someone that actually does solar, or if my solar panel had issues, I could have asked him to come and do it, because it takes a lot of tenacity to be able to pull off certain things and not be scared of it and all of that. So today we're looking at thinking fast under pressure, and I'm going to have to go to the next slide, right? What are the learning objectives? By the end of this session, learners should be able to learn how to organize thoughts quickly, respond to unexpected speaking situations confidently, reduce panic, and improve mental clarity while speaking. Now, for most of our learning objectives, we'll be looking at a predominant learning objective, which is how to organize your thoughts quickly. All right, so just in case you see it repeatedly, this is basically what this course is about, because impromptu presentation requires that you are able to organize your thoughts quickly. That is basically what impromptu presentation is, the ability to think fast under a short burst of time. Right now, the second thing is to respond unexpectedly, right, to speaking situations, to respond to unexpected speaking situations confidently. Okay, so one thing we need you to understand is that our commitment to this process is that every single concern that brought you into this class is sorted. And when we check the back end as to why people signed up for this course, especially the persons who has filled up biodata, our learners biodata, a predominant thing is knowing how to respond in unexpected situations. This is what we're going to be covering throughout this course. So just in case you see the learning outcome that it sounds predominant, just know that based on these courses are curated based on the feedback that we get from our learners. All right, so most times when we collect biodata is so that we can tweak our learning scheme, so that we can tweak what we have to offer to you, so that at the end of the day, it's not just a normal course, it's not just a usual course, it's not just a course as usual. It's that you are able to take something out of this course, that what brought you into the course, you no longer have that as a problem. All right, now the third point, or the third learning outcome we expect from today's class, is that you're able to reduce panic and improve mental clarity while speaking. I know that on Tuesday's class we largely emphasized on panic and how to manage panic situations. Please, if you were not in class and you missed that class, please go back and watch the live recording, because these courses or these subjects, they build upon each other. All right, every single thing we are learning is building upon each other. What we learned last week on Tuesday is a build up of what we learned on our onboarding. All right, because during the onboarding we did a little introduction, and then on Tuesday's class we laid the foundation, and today we're going to be moving forward. So we cannot be having like a back and forth. Every single thing we're doing is focused on making progress towards completing our learning curriculum. The whole idea is for us to complete the learning curriculum that we had mapped out for this particular cohort. All right, and just a little information, cohort 2 is already running. We're already setting up for cohort 2. So if you know anyone who struggles with impromptu presentation, and you know that so far you've been able to learn one or two things from us, and you believe that we'll be able to help the person, please feel free to share a word of encouragement to someone within your cycle to take up the course. All right, please, we're soliciting we are seriously soliciting for you to be good ambassadors for us. Thank you so very much. All right, so let's get into today's class. Now, this is an introduction. One of the biggest fears in impromptu speaking is not necessarily speaking itself. All right, it is, what if I don't know what to say? Now, for this introduction, I'm going to break down every single point bit by bit so that we clearly understand what we're trying to communicate. One of the biggest fears in impromptu speaking is not necessarily speaking itself, because let's think about it. We talk every day. We always have communication. At the heart of all we do as individuals is communicating. Every single day you communicate with your family members, you communicate with your wife, your husband, your bosses, your friends, your children, right? So at every intersection of our existence as human beings, presentation or communication is always there. There's always speaking, there's always interaction. But why does impromptu presentation make a big difference in the life of people? Why is it always that when it comes to things like impromptu presentations or presentation in general, people always struggle with, what if I don't know what to say? But this is you who speaks well every day. This is you who communicates with your family, who communicates with your loved one, and you don't have these fears. In fact, there are some persons who are naturally very, very chatty when they are with their loved ones, when they are with their friends. They can communicate, they can laugh, they can talk, they can crack jokes. They are often regarded as the most lively person in the group, or most times when they are out with their friends usually see them as the person who carries the conversation. If this person is around, our conversation is always very lively. We always have fun. We are always cheered up and all of that. Now, how does it now evolve that the same person who is all of these things to his friends or to her friends now starts struggling with, what if I don't know what to say? What if I make a mistake? What if I make a mess of myself? This is to tell you that sometimes our biggest fears comes when we are faced with things that actually trigger our reputation or our self-worth. And one of it is impromptu presentation, because in the burst of time, your major concern is, how do I protect my identity? How do I not embarrass myself? All right. Now let's go to the third line. Many people freeze not because they lack intelligence, but because pressure interrupts their thinking process. Now, I know that on Tuesday we talked so much about our mental state and how the mind is plastic. All right, so I'm going to do a little recap on that. Last week, I shared that the mind is plastic, meaning that it is malleable. There's something called brain plasticity, the ability for the brain to mold and shift in different thought patterns. Now, I stretch that if you keep a predominant thought in your head, over time that thought starts expanding. That thought becomes, pictures. They become pictures in motion. Now that's the same thing that happens when you keep a positive thought in your brain. That positive thought starts shaping your self-identity. If you also keep a negative thought in your head, that negative thought also becomes life, right? So it's more like the brain has the ability to turn things to life. That is one of the most invaluable capacities of our brain. The brain has the greatest ability to turn thoughts into life. Sometimes when you think about things and you just ponder on them over a period of time, you will see your brain start wondering how to get it done. All right, now let me share a little story with us. When I thought about creating this impromptu presentation mastery course, it just came in as an idea. What if I create a course that helps people solve this problem? It was a random thought, right? But predominantly, my brain started expanding as to, okay, what is the course curriculum going to look like? What is the marketing going to look like? What is the course program? How are we going to break it down and structure it? That is what the brain does, all right? Now, as an individual, you need to understand that you don't freeze when you are asked to make a presentation because you lack intelligence. You freeze because pressure makes your thinking process to be reduced. And that was why on Tuesday's class, we emphasized that when you have a speaking gig or you want to make a presentation in front of people and you feel that you are not really prepared, it is always advisable to pause. All right, that is why we talked about our framework that helps us to calm ourselves. Right now, thinking fast under pressure is a skill, and like every skill, it can be trained. Now, why do you think that sometimes when you are faced under certain situations, because you have built skill over that situation, it no longer feels like a problem? Let me give you a practical instance. Some persons who take this course, underwater helicopter, one skill like that has to do with training underwater, right? There are persons who master the act of swimming, right? Now, these persons, when they are in this situation, they are no longer scared. Naturally, this is someone that if they are asked to swim without training, they might become scared. They might start wondering, oh my God, am I going to drown? Am I going to die? And all of that. But the moment you get training on that thing, you're no longer afraid. You're no longer scared. Instead, you handle it from a place of wisdom. You handle it from a place of experience because it's no longer new to you. Okay, that is the same thing that happens with communication and thinking fast under pressure. When you get the necessary skills to be able to do this, it no longer becomes a problem to you. You're no longer bothered. You're no longer scared because you have built a certain level of skill and training and mastery in this particular problem. And so, thinking fast under pressure is a skill, and that was why I put it there, that thinking fast under pressure is a skill, and like every skill, it can be trained. The goal is not to think perfectly. The goal is to think clearly enough to respond confidently. Now, I'm going to take that again. The goal is not to think perfectly. The goal is to think clearly enough to respond confidently. What does clear thinking does for you? Clear thinking makes you structure your thoughts. That is what clear thinking does. It helps you structure your thoughts. It gives you that clarity to be able to dissect the problem and the question you are being asked. Because at the tail end of everything, when your thoughts are clouded, it also affects your response. It affects the way you communicate. It affects the way you tackle questions. It affects the way you respond to questions and to issues. All right. Now, the goal is not to think perfectly. Sometimes what makes people struggle when it comes to impromptu presentation or presentations in general is that you want to sound perfect, is you want to be seen as the infallible. No, but the goal is to think clearly, or to think clearly enough to respond confidently. At the end of the day, whatever you know, it is how confidently you are able to respond to it that actually shows that you know that thing. If you say you know something and you are asked about that thing and you start stuttering or you start losing your line of thought, it doesn't necessarily make people believe that you know it. But if you know something and you respond to it with such calmness and such clarity, it makes people actually believe that you truly know this thing. All right, now let's go over to the next slide. Just give me a minute. All right, now what is thinking fast under pressure? You might ask yourself, every time we talk about thinking fast under pressure, or you hear people say your ability to think fast under pressure or to work independently, sometimes in your employment or when you are looking for a job, they will tell you, if you do you have the ability to work under pressure, do you have the ability to think fast under pressure, can you handle pressure? We have so talked about this word pressure that it now puts people under pressure. You know, there's a way you emphasize on something, that thing will not start happening to you, right? We've so talked about thinking fast under pressure or working under pressure that people are now under pressure because of these things. All right, so what is thinking fast under pressure? This is the ability to quickly organize your thoughts before responding in an unexpected speaking situation. I'll take that again. Thinking fast under pressure is the ability to quickly organize your thoughts before responding in an unexpected speaking situation. Most times, you know, one thing that has to do with impromptu presentation is it is often unexpected. Sometimes it comes at the, okay, sorry, my network fleet, and I wanted to be sure that you can hear me. Please help me confirm that you can hear me. Can anybody help me confirm that you can still hear me? Maybe in the chat box or something, because I saw my network evolve. So please confirm that you can hear me. Probably in the chat or something. I just want to be sure that you can hear me, please.
We can hear you, ma.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. All right, so please let's continue. I just wanted to be sure, because you know, with the way our service providers can behave, sometimes you can be talking for long and you end up realizing that you've been talking for yourself. You've been talking to yourself rather. So I just want to always make sure that everyone can hear me and then we're talking in the right direction. Now, thinking fast under pressure is the ability to quickly organize your thoughts before responding to an unexpected speaking situation. An unexpected speaking situation can happen at any point. In Tuesday's class, we talked about these situations where we can be caught unexpectedly, and we're not going to dwell on that because we have to move with what we want to talk about today. Now, it means learning how to pause briefly before answering. All right, now when it comes to impromptu presentation and thinking fast under pressure, the first thing you need to do is to pause briefly before answering. We dwelled so much on pausing before answering, so I'm going to go over to the next slide. Now, understanding the question clearly. We haven't really talked about this, and so we're going to really dwell on that today. Sometimes when you are faced with an impromptu presentation or an unexpected speaking situation, the reason why people make mistakes is because you think you understand what you are being asked, but eventually you realize that sometimes people end up talking in error because they don't understand the question clearly. So when it comes to thinking fast under pressure, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, do I understand what they're asking me? Do I really understand what this person is asking me? Or do I really understand what this topic entails? Right? Now, if you are able to ask yourself this question, you'd realize that the moment you can answer yes to the question of if you really understand what they're asking you, every other thing becomes secondary. Because if you can answer the question of if you understand what you are being asked, now you can actually teach your mind to find answers because you already have a certain level of knowledge about this thing. Now, sometimes the reason why people make mistakes when it comes to impromptu presentation or when it comes to presentation in general is that a question might sound familiar, but the context might differ from the answer they are giving. Now, I'll take that again. A question might sound familiar, but the context might differ from the answer that you are giving. A person might ask you a question, and the context at which they're asking that question can be different from the response you are giving. And so when it comes to impromptu presentation or thinking quickly under pressure, the first point of call is to ask yourself, do I understand the question clearly? Because sometimes impromptu presentations always come in form of questions or, you know, speaking engagements or situations that come up like questions. But what you need to understand is to ask yourself, do I really understand this question? Do I understand what is required of me to say? Do I understand this topic? Do I understand what this person wants to hear? Right? Do I have sufficient knowledge to be able to answer this question accurately? Because at the tail end of everything, right, The question is not the problem. Your response often becomes the problem. When a person asks you a question, they don't expect you to answer immediately. They expect you to actually take your time to process the question. If somebody asks you, what do you think about this? They don't expect you to start talking immediately, and that is why they use the word think, because think means that you have to have enough time to process your own thoughts about that thing. All right, but what happens to us most times is that when you are asked a question, you have not even understood the context of why that question is being asked, and then you now answer off point. And so sometimes you realize that when a person actually answers a question, then they'll now tell you, oh no, that's not what I was asking. I was asking in this line. Then you now have to go back and start saying, oh, I'm so sorry, I thought I understood it like this. So the first thing you need to do is to try to understand the question you are being asked, because that is the basis upon which every other answer you would give would rest on. If you don't understand the question accurately, your responses can actually sound off point. And then the moment someone or an interviewer tells you that you have answered, off point, it now throws you off balance completely, right? So it is very important that the first thing you have to do is to ask yourself if you truly understand the question that is being asked. Now, the second thing you need to do when it comes to thinking fast under pressure is to choose your main points quickly. If you have ascertained that you understand the question that is being asked, for instance, if they ask you, what is breakfast? Let me use the word breakfast, right? Or what is lunch? Because sometimes people look at breakfast as heartbreak, right? So I'm not talking about breakfast in terms of heartbreak. I'm actually talking about the first meal you eat in the morning, which is breakfast, right? But let me use lunch. Now, if somebody asks you, what is lunch? Obviously, you know that lunch is the food you have in the afternoon, okay? Just immediately after your breakfast. But sometimes lunch can differ. The concept of lunch can be broad, okay? Now, if you have chosen your question, if you have convinced yourself that you fully understand the question that is being asked, now when you choose your main points quickly, you can actually choose to tell people that lunch is the meal you have just after breakfast, or is the meal you have in the afternoon to refuel your body for the work ahead of the day. That is a simple answer, all right? But that is your main point. Now, what happens to most of us is that we try to mumble into many things in our head at the same time, forgetting the main point. The main point is a direct response to the question that is being asked. I'll take that again. The main point in your speaking engagement is a direct response to the question that is being asked. So if you are asked a question, always remember that your main point should be a direct response to the question that is being asked. Every other thing you say after then is additional. Every other thing you say after then is trying to add flesh to whatever you are already talking about. But the primary focus, or the primary thing you need to always remember, is that your main point is a direct response to the question that is being asked. This is what lays the foundation for whatever you are doing. This is what lays the foundation to whatever other things, other topics, or other points you're going to be making, okay? The moment you've been able to put out your main point, sometimes when you watch all these interviews that people used to have on podcasts and live cameras, right, they'll ask the person, okay, what do you think about this? These speakers would use something very strong to open, and then you will now see the interviewer, they will now take a nod. Wow, that's amazing, that's amazing. As the speaker or the interviewer is trying to bask in the euphoria of the response the person has given, it is giving the person that is being asked a question additional time to think about more things to say. All right, so I need you to understand that your main point is a direct response to the question that is being asked, because at the end of the day, that is what people want to hear. If somebody asks you a question, they're not trying to hear the rambling that is around the question. What they want to know is your definition or your understanding of the question and how well you are able to give a straight answer, okay? After you have given your main point, every other thing can flow from there, because that is what the person wants to hear first. But sometimes we spend so much time in preambles that before you now get to the main point, the person has lost interest, or the congregation has lost interest. Have you ever listened to some events, or you have been at certain events, and they'll tell you that, oh, they are bringing someone who is an expert in marketing. This person has been marketing for the past 30 years. They have been marketing for the past 20 years. And then you now ask the person, okay, can you tell us, some of the strategies that helped you become a great marketer? And the person will now start giving you their life history, will start rumbling, will start talking, will go from here to there, will share from this to this. Even if they eventually share those secrets or those points that made them a great marketer, but just because they didn't answer the question directly, you have lost the audience. So a greater way to do this is that when you are asked a question, answer with your main point. Give them the main point first, all right? Then you can now start adding your life history to it. If they ask you a question and you want to give a direct answer, your answer should be a direct response to the question that is already asked. That is how you beat the whole pressure, or the whole ability to think fast under pressure. When you are asked a question, what is your name? You don't start saying, I'm the MD, I'm the CEO, I'm the godfather, I'm the godmother. Nobody cares. What people want to know is the answer. My name is Marigold Okoye. Then you can now add every other thing around it. All right. This actually makes the person stay more interested in what you have to say. But sometimes people feel like the more you talk about the preambles, the better engaged a person is. Sometimes it doesn't happen like that, right? You see in a meeting, they'll call someone who has 30 or 40 years experience. They'll start by reading their profile. I was the CEO, the MD, the godfather, the godmother. The people don't really care about all of those things. People actually came with a problem, and if you've been able to solve their problem to a desired degree, now they can pay attention to whoever you are. Now I need you to understand, by default, human beings are naturally selfish. All right. Now, I'll take that again. By default, human beings are naturally selfish. If a person wants to listen to you, they're not listening to you because of your name. They're listening to you because of how you can solve a problem that they have. All right. If I come to you with a problem, I really do not care how long you've been solving that problem. I have a problem. Solve the problem for me. The same thing happens with impromptu presentations and speaking under pressure. When somebody asks you a question, or when you are being asked a question as a professional, what you need to focus on is making sure that you understand the context of the question that is being asked. And then your main point should now be a direct response to that question. All right. There's a reason why I'm emphasizing on this, because this is where a lot of speakers or a lot of professionals struggle. The need to over-validate the point actually makes the point useless, right? When you try to over-validate your idea, when you try to over-validate what you know, it now makes the whole idea of listening to you pointless. All right. Now, what is the third point? Responding in a clear and structured way. Like I told us in Tuesday's class, that this course is going to be embellished with a lot of frameworks, and our third class, which is on Saturday, we're going to start our introduction to frameworks. But for our first class, which was on Tuesday, and today being our second class, we're trying to lay the foundations of all of these things so that you can fully understand the context as to what we are talking about and why these things are important. All right. Now, responding in a clear and a structured way. What is this? It means that when you are asked a question, always ask yourself, what do I know? What is my point? What is my example? And what is my conclusion? On Tuesday, we made an introduction to one of the frameworks that we can always use, all right, when we are being asked a question, which is introduction, main point 1, main point 2, and conclusion. All right, now this is one out of the numerous frameworks that are available for us to answer questions depending on the situation we find ourselves. Now, I need you to understand that some of these frameworks were created for us to be able to answer questions or solve problems in different phases. I'll take that again. The frameworks in impromptu presentations were created for us as professionals to be able to know which speaking situation requires which framework, and which of the frameworks should I use in answering this question. For instance, when somebody gives you 3 minutes to make a presentation, the framework you're going to use to answer that question or respond to that question in 3 minutes will not be the same framework you're going to use to respond to a 2 minutes or a 1 minute speaking space or a speaking time, right? If someone tells you, oh, in 1 minute, please answer this question for us, you invariably know that within 1 minute, you should use a framework that contains everything you want to say in 1 minute. So a good framework can be introduction, main point, conclusion, because it's 1 minute. Now, if you're given 3 minutes to make a presentation, now you can add more things in between. Now you can have introduction, main point 1, main point 2, then conclusion. All right. So one thing that has to do with impromptu presentation is understanding what is the time frame allocated for this, and how many information, or what is the depth of information I have about this topic, and what framework sufficiently covers this thing in such a way that when I make this presentation using this framework, I can sufficiently elapse the time that was allocated to me. Okay, now I need us to understand that impromptu presentations are not difficult when you know how to use frameworks, and when you know how to answer questions based on structure. All right, now what is our next point? In simple terms, instead of speaking immediately out of panic, you train yourself to process your thoughts first, then speak with confidence. Now, the whole idea about speaking fast under pressure is not for you to start speaking fast. No, is that you are able to calm your mind, understand the question that is being asked, choose your main point quickly, then respond confidently. All right. All of these things happens in seconds when you are able to train your mind to understand the context of everything that has to do with impromptu presentation and how to use frameworks to answer questions. All right, now let's go over to the next slide. Now, what is the truth about fast thinkers? The first truth or the myth about fast thinkers is that fast thinkers are usually smarter. That's not true. Fast thinkers are not smarter than you. In fact, the people that you consider to be fast thinkers are natural people who just develop their skills to do this or the ability to do this better. Okay, everything that looks like a problem is an information gap. I'll take that again. Everything you meet in life that looks like a problem is an information gap. Your ability to solve things is largely dependent on the amount of information you have about that thing. So sometimes when you see someone who is an excellent speaker or someone who is very eloquent in communication, you convince yourself that this person was born with it. Trust me, not many persons who are excellent at what they do were born with those things. They built themselves. They gained information. Every single problem you have is an information problem. The moment you derive information sufficient enough to solve that problem, it no longer becomes a problem. Let me take, for instance, for some of us who went to university, right? We went to university to study a particular course. Let's say, for instance, went to university to become an engineer. And at first, the concept of engineering sounded broad. It sounded like something out of this world. It sounded like an ecstasy thing. But when you got into year one, you start understanding bit by bit what engineering is and the foundations of engineering. All right. By year two, you now start doing practicals. By year three, you now start going for field work. By year four, you now became a master on engineering. How did you become a master on engineering? By information gathering. That's the same thing that happens with communication skills. That's the same thing that happens with perfecting impromptu presentations. You get better at these things with the amount of information you are able to stuff about these things and to understand about these things, and with consistent practice. All right, people see communication or impromptu presentations as skills that are out of this world. They are not. They simply get better by how sufficiently you are able to practice, and that's why we emphasize on being in class, joining the activities, paying attention to what's going on, and showing up for yourself and for this skill that you want to perfect or this problem you want to overcome. All right, so sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that persons who are fast thinkers are smarter. They are not smarter. Or you think that, oh, this person is more talented. Talent that is not used will become dormant, right? Whatever it is, if you do not put it into practice, same thing that happens with every skill that we once thought we had. All right, think about people that are very good at singing, for instance. These persons are natural singers. They sing excellently, but over time they stopped harnessing that skill. They stopped using that skill, and sometimes they now want to open their voice and they're struggling. They're cranky. They're now looking like, oh, it's not me that used to sing very well, so why am I struggling with this thing? You are struggling with it because you left it, and that is why it left you. Think about persons that went to university and studied a certain course, and they came out as the best graduating student, but they looked for a job for a certain amount of time and they didn't see a job. And just because they came out as the best graduating student and they were not able to practice due to lack of job, they now found themselves in a different field. When they now go back to that field that they came out as the best graduating student from, they sometimes do not even know anything about that course anymore because the thing has left them. Right? And this is the same thing that happens with communication. This is the same thing that happens with every other skill that you learn. When you are learning a skill, the whole idea of learning that skill is to overcome the challenge that skill might have provided or might have preferred. So the best thing you can do for yourself is to make sure that you practice, you get better at this thing, you start using this thing in your daily life. All right? Now, another myth about people who are fast thinkers is that they are naturally confident. Confidence is a skill. People learn confidence. And sometimes I get baffled when people say things like, oh, this person is just gifted. This person is just talented. It's not true. There are persons who struggle with imposter syndrome a lot. But by virtue of training and by virtue of being around a certain person, you see that imposter syndrome begins to disappear. Now, why do you think that a child who has a present father always outperforms a child who has an absent father? All right? Because a child with a present father can make mistakes and get correction and get feedback. Now, a child with an absent father can make mistakes, and the amount of time it will take that child to be able to learn from that mistake, they have almost become a man, or they have gone into adulthood, or they've gone into their teenage. Now, you see that Sometimes there's this quote I love so much. They say, learn to forgive yourself for learning the things only time could teach. Now, as an individual, one thing you need to understand is that we are all malleable. The mind is clay. Our brains are clay. Nobody is born, in as much as yes, people are born with certain skills, right? But people get better at things by the amount of time they do it. Now, as a communications trainer, I get better at communicating and training because I do these things almost every day. This is my source of income. Teaching and training is what I do for a living. All right. Now, the more I do these things, the more I take myself to courses, the more I pay for courses, the more I subscribe to learn from other persons, and I put in the strategies that I learned from them, the more I get better at this skill. This is the same thing that happens with every other skill that we're learning. So I want to debunk the myth that persons who are fast thinkers are naturally talented. It's a huge lie from the very, very pit of hell, from bottomless pit. Now, what is the truth about people who are fast thinkers? People who are fast thinkers, they simply stay calm, okay? One thing about becoming an excellent communicator is the ability to stay calm. I cannot overemphasize this enough. When you rush to answer a question or to respond to something, you are not giving your brain enough time to relax. I told us on Tuesday that the brain creates fireworks the moment anything that feels like a threat comes around it. For instance, someone who is a natural communicator, who is talking with their friends, you can be in a meeting and gisting with your friends and you are flowing. The moment they call your name to make a presentation, you start fidgeting. This is the same you who was having a conversation, who was at ease, who was talking, who was laughing, who was leading the conversation with your friends. Why are you now freezing the moment they ask you to make a presentation? Because the brain is triggered to protect itself from external threats. And some of the external threats in communication can be things like impromptu presentation because you're not aware and we don't like being taken off guard. All right. Now, but what can you do to become a fast thinker or to get better at these things is to stay calm. Okay. Now, the second thing is to simplify ideas. Now, the reason why I did not dwell on staying calm is because we talked extensively about handling pressure in the first class. So please, if you missed the first class or you didn't stay till the end, please go back and rewatch the first class. I think Jovel, who is our programs coordinator, has sent a link to rewatch the last class. I think Jovel or her assistant did that. So please go back, check the group and look for a link to the last class and watch everything we talked about on day one, which was on Tuesday, as to how to stay calm and how to respond from a place of calmness. And then the 3-step calm reclaim framework, how you can get calm and how you can do those things. All right. Now we're going to simplify ideas. What does it mean to simplify an idea? Every single question you are being asked is simple if you can understand it, if you can break it down in components. All right. Sometimes when a person asks you a question, they use jargon, they use big words. The thing is so embellished with big grammar that the main question they're asking, you can't even find the question because the person has suffocated the question with too much English. And that is why, as a rule of being an excellent communicator, you have to understand your audience, right? If there are persons who are within your technicality, you speak to them with technical terms. But if there are persons who are not within your technicalities, please speak to them with everyday English. For instance, if you are a tech professional and you use things like API, software, backend, database, Python, JavaScript, and all of that, if you're talking to me who is a communications professional, I don't understand what you're saying. So if you're coming to tell me that, Marigo, please, we need you to debunk the API using the problem. You're not talking to me. I might be looking at you, but you're not talking to me. You're not communicating with me. And I might end up making mistakes. Okay. So when you want to speak to anybody or when you're making a presentation, understand this person's demographic. What do they know about this topic? What do they understand about this subject matter? All right. If you're talking to persons that are in your office, let's say, for instance, as a professional, you get called upon to share what your team is doing. These are persons within your field. They are within your niche. They understand the topic because they are your colleagues. But let's say, for instance, you get better and then you start putting yourself out there and companies call you to come and make presentations or to come and teach, or some of these foundations that are raising young persons call you to come and talk on a certain topic that is related to your niche. The first thing you need to understand is, who are my target audience? Who am I speaking to? What do they know about this topic? Because one of the greatest mistakes you can make as a professional is to go to a speaking engagement and not do your demographic or understand the people you are speaking to. Now, you can be talking in high-level communication or using high-level grammar, and then you're speaking to persons who are in JS3 or SS3, and you lose the audience completely. All right. Now, let me give us a little backstory as to what I just said now. in terms of understanding your audience. So sometime last month, a friend of mine who has a foundation reached out to me, and she was like, "Oh, Marigold, please, I want you to be a guest speaker for our speaking event. I mean, for this outreach that we are doing, we need you to be there." And I was like, "Okay, no problem. Since you're my friend, I will show up, because naturally I don't like going for every invite. But because I know the person and she's my friend and she's building as well, I was like, okay, I'm going to come." Now, one mistake I made was I did not ask her what is the demographic. Who am I going to be speaking to? I just heard outreach and I saw foundation, and I'm like, okay, fine. They're going to be talking to young people, small children, you know. I didn't ask her the demographic. What do these people know? Let me now fast forward to the whole thing. The day came, we got to the venue. I looked at the terrain and I told myself that this is serious. And do you know, I was even asking her if I should prepare slides. Can you imagine? When I got to the place, it was not the remotest of the remote part of, you know, the state where I'm in, right? And by looking at the environment alone, I knew that slides was not going to work. Can you guys believe that I ended up teaching the topic she gave me in Igbo language? Now, I'm an Igbo girl, right? And I can't remember the last time I did any presentation in Igbo. But when I got there that day, I had to teach in Igbo language. This is to make you understand that if I'm not someone who is a natural communicator, I will have disgraced myself. Because what do you mean that people have not even finished talking well in English? Now you're now communicating in Igbo. And the funny part is that I was not teaching children who were below 10 years. That's to tell you how wild these things can be. And at my own end, it was an error, because I was supposed to ask her. I was supposed to do my due diligence, all right? But I didn't do my due diligence. I didn't ask her. I didn't find out the demographic who I was speaking to. I showed up with confidence, knowing that, okay, I mean, these things are things that we're already used to. So anyhow, we're going to do it and we're going to do it well. That's one thing that overconfidence can do for you. So don't ever get to that point where you feel like, okay, I'm already stable in anything. Always do your due diligence. Tackle every problem like you are just starting out in that field. That was the mistake I made. I reached there, I was speaking to children who were below 10 years, and they could not understand an atom of English. That was the most difficult speaking engagement I've had. But funnily enough, one thing that I know that helps me as a professional is, just because I've been able to internalize a lot of frameworks, the moment I reached there, I asked myself, what do these children know? And the funny part is that the topic they gave me was on finance, teaching children below 10 years on finance, how to manage finance. You know, so I had to ask myself, what do these children know? And how can I simplify this thing in such a way that they can relate this thing I want to teach them to their everyday life? Now, I didn't go there to start speaking about, you know, rich dad, poor dad, or managing finance, and I had to break it down to their home. I had to bring down the topic to their home, and I start asking them, if your mommy give you 10 naira and she tells you to go to the market, are you going to spend all the 10 naira? They shouted, no! Just by bringing it down to their home, I was able to have an engaged audience, children that are 10 years who cannot speak English, but I was able to speak to them in a language that they could understand, which is relating what I wanted to share with them with something they are used to. So as a professional or someone that is trying to master the art of public speaking, the first thing you need to do when you want to think fast under pressure is to simplify the idea. All right, simplify the concept. How do I break this thing down in such a way that this person I'm speaking to can understand what I'm trying to say? You don't need to go there and start speaking big English. I will have seriously disgraced myself, embarrassed my friend, embarrassed my lineage, made a mess of my certification and professionalism as a communications expert if I reach there and start speaking English to these children. Or I now brought out laptop and said, let's project what I want to say. How stupid will it look? Now, this is what simplifying your idea does for you. When you are asked a question or when you are under a pressure situation, start by simplifying the idea. What do they know? And what can I do differently? Or what can I share in relation to what they know? All right. I don't think any concept in this world is new. There is no new concept. People just amplify things. All right. So if you're in that situation where you want to talk about something or to share your quota about something, always understand that this thing is not new. You're not manufacturing any new concept. There is nothing you talk about now that has not been in existence. Oratory and presentation has been in existence right from the time of Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, and you know, all the great poets of the 1908 and before Christ and all of that. So these concepts are not new. But what makes you an excellent communicator or an excellent professional or someone who is mastering the act of impromptu presentations is their ability to simplify ideas. If you're asked a question or you're asked to come and make a presentation, break down this idea in simple bits. Understand the overall concept of what you are being asked to do, right? And then talk in little terms. Break it down in such a way that even you as a person always approach a topic like you're speaking to a 5-year-old, especially when you understand the demographic is within that bracket or they don't know anything about this topic. Now, if you are talking to persons who are in the same professional line with you, you are free to use your jargon, you are free to use your professional dictionary and your professional words that you people use within your own niche, but always try to simplify the idea. Now, the next thing you need to do is to use mental frameworks. Like I told us in the introduction of the class, tomorrow we're going to be, on Saturday, we're going to be examining a lot of frameworks, all right? Saturday's class is basically on all the frameworks that you can use to make your presentation or to master this act of impromptu presentation mastery. So I'm not going to be dwelling on frameworks. Now, what is the fourth thing that excellent speakers or people who think fast under pressure, what is the fourth thing that they do? They trust themselves. Now, I need you to understand that you have to trust yourself as a professional. If you don't trust yourself, you would always operate from a place of doubt and imposter syndrome. I cannot overemphasize this enough. Do you know that? Let me use that speaking engagement I had as an example. If I was someone that struggled with imposter syndrome, I could have excused myself from that event that day because it was a difficult situation. Imagine children who live in the suburb, who do not understand English, who practically are looking at you as a messiah to teach them something that can help them. And then you now come and you start making a mess of yourself. At first, I was worried because I know that I speak my language fluently, but I've never used my language to teach before, right? It's a different ball game when you can teach with your language, or when this thing is, you do this thing with your language. It is easy. But when you are trying to teach something with a language that you only speak for communication, internal communication within your house or with your friends, and then you are asked to explain concepts with this language, it becomes difficult. But what helps me was the ability to trust myself. So as a professional or as someone who is trying to master the act of thinking fast on your feet, always trust yourself. All right, trust yourself. No one is going to beat you, no one is going to kill you. But one thing that actually kills people is when they start doubting themselves. The moment you start doubting yourself, your body starts responding to that doubt. I'll take that again. The moment you start doubting yourself as a professional, as an expert, your body starts responding to that doubt. So the things that you naturally know, you will now start acting like someone who doesn't know them, simply because you've allowed fear creep into your and that is why imagination. Please, can you help me confirm that you can hear me? Please, can you still hear me? Maybe if you can put it in the chat box, please. Can you just help me confirm that you can hear me? Let me see. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. My network flipped for a minute, so I had to switch network. Thank you so much for the feedback. All right, so I'm going to reproject my screen again so that we can continue from where we stopped. Okay, I'm going to reshare my screen so that we can continue from where we stopped. All right, now I was saying that persons who think fast under pressure are people who have built a certain level of trust for themselves. All right, they have learned how to trust themselves. They have been able to master the act of trusting themselves. Okay, so I just want to be sure. Please, can you see my screen? Can you see the slide? Please, can someone confirm that you can see my slide? uh, no, sorry, I didn't hear that. Sorry, can you see my slide? Even if it's to drop it in the chat, okay, like if you can drop it in the chat that you can see my slide, I would really appreciate that so that we can continue. Okay, I just got a feedback that you can see it. All right, thank you very much. Thank you for the feedback. I'm so sorry. Please, this our it's our internet. we all understand how our internet can be at some point. Yeah, so I was saying that the persons who have the ability to think fast under pressure are persons who trust themselves. All right, so one thing you need to focus on as a professional or as an individual is to trust yourself. Trust that you can do this no matter how complex the topic might be. Always have this mindset that I can do this. I have knowledge about this. All right, and then when you convince yourself that you can do it, you find yourself doing that thing. Once you tell yourself that, oh, I can do this, you will see yourself doing it. But the moment you tell yourself that you cannot do something or that you cannot do this thing, you would invariably your brain will use its hand and convince itself that you cannot do that thing. And these things are so powerful because sometimes even for the persons who literally know these things, okay, when they are asked a question, you see them struggling to answer because somehow they've told themselves that, oh, I don't know this thing, or I don't know it. And your brain will actually confirm that you don't know it because it will start sending negative signals to your head. Okay, so one thing you need to do is to learn how to trust yourself, is to learn how to convince yourself beyond reasonable doubt that you know these things and you can do it. All right, the moment you tell yourself these things, or you do these self-fulfilling prophecies in your head, your body will start reacting in that direction. All right, your body always reacts to the direction of your predominant thought. Now I'll take that again. Your body always reacts in the direction of your predominant thought. So whatever thoughts that predominantly stays in your head about you, about your skills, about your ability, your body would naturally react in that direction. If you convince yourself that, oh, I don't know this thing, or I cannot do it, your body will react in that direction. If you also tell yourself that, oh, I know this thing and I can do it, I just need a little practice, your body would react in that direction and it will cooperate with you in that practice. All right, have you not wondered how that if you tell yourself that, oh, I'm going to do this thing in 20 minutes and this is the reward I'm going to give myself for being able to do this thing in 20 minutes, just because you've created a certain reward system for yourself, you would see your body that is exhausted, it will start cooperating with you to be able to get that reward. It's so magical. Now, sometimes you can actually start doing invincible rewards. All right, what do I mean by invincible rewards? Now, when I start practicing the act of rewarding myself, I'll tell myself that, because I'm someone that likes cakes a lot. Now, I'll tell myself that if I finish this task at the stipulated time that I've set out to do the task, I'm going to reward myself with a slice of cake. Immediately, no matter how tired I am, the moment I tell myself that because I like cake and this is the reward for doing this, the moment I finish that task and I get that cake, it acts like a compensation. There's this joy I feel that, oh, I merited this cake. Even if I'm the one that used my money to buy the cake, oh, just because I have actually set that thing in my head as a reward system, I'll now start treating that cake like a reward. All right. Now, when I start practicing invincible rewards, is that I ask myself, what or how can my life become better simply by mastering this thing? Okay, now I start imagining how that, oh, I am able to train professionals in different levels. I'm able to handle or create speaking gigs that experts will come for. I'm able to create a certain level of professionalism around what I do. That was a mental reward for me. And I can tell you for free that just because I had that mental picture, I started treating my downtimes as steps to my reward. Okay, so sometimes when the things became difficult, or when creating a course, for instance, trying to create a course is complex. All right, it takes a lot of reading, research, and all of that. But just because in my head I know that, oh, I'm working towards becoming a global trainer, I'm working towards becoming training people in the UK, people are out of this country, so I need to start creating mental rewards for myself that keeps me in check, that makes me believe myself, that makes me trust myself. All right, and just by practicing these things, some people call it manifestation, but I call it mental rewards. Just by creating these systems of mental reward, it invariably changed my consistency and my dedication to certain things, because I always picture myself, having trainings in the UK and outside the country. All right, now you can do the same thing when it comes to thinking fast under pressure. When you are asked a question, always see yourself as someone that knows it. Always have a positive thought about yourself, because the truth is that you can take all the classes on impromptu presentation and communication and any other skill, but the moment you convince yourself that this thing is not for people like us, it will not be for people like you. It will never be for people like you. Now, I watched a documentary one time about someone who actually had cerebral palsy, all right? But he became one of the greatest preachers that ever existed. And when they did an interview, they asked him, how was he able to communicate with persons who were normal as someone that has cerebral palsy? And he said, first, it was God. But secondly, it was that he told himself that he could do it. And he used the scripture, which is, I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. Now, these things are words that we say out of faith. But the moment you start telling yourself that I can do all things, all right, your body starts reacting to that affirmation. And that is why words of affirmation is extremely important. Just the same way people conform to negative words, your brain also conforms to positive words. Your mind, your life, your existence actually conforms to positivity. All right, so let's move to the last line. Now, it says here that, in other words, thinking fast under pressure is mostly organized thinking. All right, now when you hear people say, oh, thinking fast under pressure, what does it mean? It's mostly organized thinking. The ability to not think in diaspora. You're not thinking, scatteredly or sporadically. Instead, you're trying to organize your thoughts based on some of the things we've talked about, such as, what is the question that is being asked? What information do I know about this? And then how can I stay calm to be able to give a meaningful response to the question that is being asked? All right, now let's go to the next slide. Now, what is the pressure response cycle? All right, when people are put on the spot, this is what usually happens. Now, the first line, this first chain here is what usually happens when people are put on the spot. Now, when people are put on the spot without training, the first thing that happens is panic. All right, we talked about panic in our last class, so I'm not going to dwell on panic. Okay, the first thing that happens is panic. They get tense, they get scared, they start wondering, oh my God, am I going to disgrace myself? Am I going to embarrass myself? That's the first thing. That is a pressure response. All right, now the second thing that happens is mental block. Your mind goes blank, because your brain has been put under so much pressure that it invariably forgets everything that you naturally would have supposed to know, or the natural response you are supposed to give. All right, which is mental block. These things that people say, oh, I go blank when I'm asked a question, is a pressure response. Your brain is responding to a panic situation. Your brain is responding to a pressure situation, and that is why it goes blank. All right, now, what is the manifestation of all of these things that are happening within your head? Silence. So most times when people are asked a question, or when people are put on the spot in impromptu presentations, and they stay silent for a long time, is because in that moment of pressure, all of these things happen. All right, in that moment of pressure, all of these things that we've talked about has happened at the back end. Your brain has panicked, your body has panicked, you have experienced mental blockness, your head has blocked, and then the only thing that shows that this process has actually happened is that you stay silent, because at the tail end of everything, because of that blankness, you're not able to make any sensible contribution. Not because you don't know what to say, no, but because due to the depth of pressure that your brain has been put under, it has not been able to process any meaningful thoughts. And that is why things like silence occur. And so you see some people, they would say, oh, I knew what to say, but I couldn't just say it. I couldn't say it. But they don't understand that these things are natural biological responses of the body to things like pressure, fear, and panic. All right. So your body would naturally respond to these things because you have put it under a certain level of pressure, or the situation has created a certain level of pressure that questions your credibility. And I told us that one thing that people do not joke with is their reputation, their credibility, their integrity. All right. So sometimes when a situation questions your credibility or your reputation, it invariably puts you under tension. It invariably makes you scared. So I need you to understand that panic is a natural thing. Mental block is a natural thing. Silence is a natural thing. But the real thing now is, how do I avoid these things? All right. How do I go past these things? Even though I have made peace with the fact that these responses are natural responses that are triggered by fear and pressure, my own responsibility now as a professional who is making a certain level of commitment to be able to overcome this problem is, how do I overcome it? And that is what we're going to be looking at in this other chain that is here. Now, it says here that trained speakers do this instead. As a trained speaker, when you are under pressure, now you see that I didn't remove pressure from the chain so that it doesn't look like because you are a trained speaker, you don't feel these things. I need us to understand that some of these things are very natural. All right. If I had removed pressure from here, it makes you feel like just because you underwent a certain level of training, then that natural biological response doesn't happen. It's a lie. That is why I told us that pressure and fear is a natural biological response. Every human being, even the best speakers. I remember that when I was giving us my own scenario as to the speaking engagement that I was called to come and make a presentation and I didn't adequately prepare, I told us that I felt pressure. I felt pressure. Now, imagine that for almost 3 days, I've been teaching non-stop, and most times what I use to do my teaching are just bullet points, and then I teach from my head because these things are already there. Now, imagine that I've been able to get this level of expertise or understanding of the subject matter of communication and impromptu presentation, yet in a situation where my integrity was tested, I still felt pressure. So I want us to understand that the concept of feeling pressure or the concept of feeling fear or panic in every speaking engagement is natural. Because sometimes people will tell you that, oh, I don't know why my body used to shake. My hand will be shaking. My leg will be shaking. It happens to the best of us. But one thing that separates people from people who have mastered this skill and persons who are trying to get better at it is that even when it happens within you. All right. So sometimes I can be under pressure. Like that day, I told us that if not because I've been able to get a certain grasp of this thing and I've been able to convince myself that I can do all things, I could have gone home. It was that much of a pressure situation, right? It was that much of a pressure situation for me because I was looking at over 100 children who were already excited that, oh, Clean Auntie came to their town. Clean Auntie came to talk to them. And Clean Auntie now is now looking like Clean Auntie don't know what she's doing. So in that situation, I was also under pressure. And my natural biological response was tension. I was scared. I was fidgeting. But it was happening inside me. And nobody saw it. All right? This is what training does for you. It helps you learn how to contain pressure. Your ability to contain pressure and stay calm is what makes you a trained professional. And that is why you can go to the hospital and a patient is about to die. Literally, the time is ticking. You will see the doctor still stay calm. And you'll be shouting, oh my God, the blood of Jesus, the blood of everything. And the doctor is calm. Now, sometimes they'll say, oh, doctors don't have conscience. It's a lie. They have trained themselves to manage pressure. And that is one thing you need to learn when it comes to impromptu presentation. The ability to manage pressure makes you an excellent communicator. It is not what you learn. It is not the fact that you attended a training by the Law Academy. No, it is you being able to manage your own body's internal response to certain situations. That's what shows that you have actually undergone training. All right. Now, what do trained professionals do when they are under pressure? The first thing they do is that they acknowledge the pressure. All right. I know that in our other class, that was Tuesday's class, I told us that your ability to acknowledge whatever you feel actually dilutes that feeling. I'll take that again. Your ability to acknowledge whatever you feel actually dilutes that feeling. The real reason why people get scared is because they don't know what this thing is. That is why they say fear of the unknown. All right? Fear of the unknown only exists because the concept is new, it is alien to you. But the moment you are able to understand the concept, it no longer becomes fear of the unknown. You are aware of it. So you are treating it from a place of knowledge, not fear. Now, the way you respond to something you know is that you respond from confidence, you respond from stability, you respond from awareness. But when you are tackled or when you are being face to face with fear of the unknown, that is where things like panic comes up. That is where things like fidgeting, that is where these things surface because you do not know this thing. And so your body is responding to the fact that you are ignorant about this thing. But the moment you acknowledge a situation, let's say, for instance, you are called to make an impromptu presentation, and by default, you are supposed to be scared. But you acknowledge the fact that, oh, this is new, but then I know something about this and I can say something. The moment you say this thing to yourself, it immediately dilutes the pressure. All right? It doesn't take away the pressure. Please note my words. I didn't say it immediately takes away the pressure. No, I said it immediately dilutes the pressure, meaning that the pressure can still be there, but the intensity of the pressure reduces because you are aware. Awareness makes it impossible for you to feel scared. If I'm aware that there is dog in this compound, I know that there is dog there, so I'm not going there. Do you understand? Or I know that there is dog in this compound. Instead of me to go there as an unaware person and get beaten, I will call the owner of the house. Please come and hold your dog. Oh, please hold your dog. Oh, do you understand? So naturally you might be scared, but because you have accepted the fact that this thing is there, but I can handle it, you have diluted the pressure. All right. Now, when pressure is diluted, the next thing that comes upon you is calmness. When you've been able to dilute that pressure of what your body is feeling, you now become calm, and that is where you get that pause. That sometimes you say that this person is doing big man, this person is communicating like a big man. It's a lie. Some of these very rich people also take these courses that we take, or these courses that we are taking, and they hear these things and they practicalize it. So sometimes you can ask a person a question and you see them take a pause. All right, that pause they are taking is their ability to comport themselves and to contain that pressure that they are feeling. Now they have made peace with the fact that this pressure exists, and so they are taking a pause. Now, when you take a pause, what is the natural thing that your mind does? It organizes your thoughts. Okay? The way you handle a situation when you do not calm down is different from the way you handle that situation when you are calmer. If your child or your sibling or your colleague does something and you go home and think about that thing for a while, the way you handle that situation would be quite different from how you handle that situation if you respond or react immediately. And that is why organizing your thoughts is a core skill, right? The ability to organize your thoughts after you have processed your pressure, you have acknowledged the pressure, you have taken that pause, and now you have made peace with the pressure that is happening, and you start organizing your thoughts. Trust me, you don't need to respond to every question that you are being asked immediately. There is no law in this universe that states that you must answer a question immediately. I'll take that again. There's a reason why I keep saying I'll take that again, so that these things can sink. There is no law on earth, under the earth, above the earth, that says that you should answer a question that is being asked to you immediately. All right? The moment you have accepted the fact that you are not under duress to give a response immediately, that is when you can now handle pressure better. This is when you can pause, and this is when you can organize your thoughts. Let them wait for you. It is better that your audience are waiting for you to comport yourself, or they're waiting for you to carry yourself as the big man or the big woman that you are and make a presentation, than for you to run into the presentation and make a mess of yourself. All right? Now, when you have successfully managed these three phases, which is taking a pause, managing your pressure, organizing your thoughts, then you can now proceed to speaking. And trust me, if you handle these three phases very well, whatever you say after these phases always sound more articulate than if you skip these three phases entirely. All right. If you rush from panic to speaking, that is where you go blank. If you rush from panic or mental block to silence, that is where you embarrass yourself. But the moment you acknowledge the pressure, you take a pause and you organize your thoughts, whatever you say after then actually sounds more articulate because you've been able to gather all the data in your brain concerning that topic. It is the same thing that ChatGPT does. For some of us that use AI, when you impute a prompt in AI, you will see that it will take a second to count. It's like it's beeping, and then it will start producing information. All right. That is the same thing your brain is supposed to do. When you are asked a question, don't be in a hurry to respond. Take a moment, be like ChatGPT. In fact, it's like I'll make that thing, a slide. Act like ChatGPT. When you are asked a question, take a few seconds to think. Sometimes, when you are using like the advanced or the paid plan of ChatGPT, it will tell you thinking. It will show you there literally that it is thinking. Okay, so why as a human being, if AI can think, why can't you think as a human being? What law says that when you are asked a question, you must respond immediately? There is no law whatsoever that says that. So because you are higher than AI as a human being, you must learn to think. You must learn to process your thoughts. And when you are able to make your presentation from a place of calmness and confidence, whatever you say outside then always sounds better. All right, so now let's move on to the last thing that is on this slide. Now, it says here that the pause is important. All right, you don't need to answer immediately. Even 3 to 5 seconds of controlled thinking can improve your response dramatically. All right, and I think that is supposed to be drastically, but let's just use dramatically because that is what is there. Now, even 3 to 5 seconds of controlled thinking can improve your response drastically. 3 to 5 seconds of controlled thinking, it can improve your response drastically. All right, and sometimes you see the way these things work is that they work in such a way that it makes you look very confident, but they don't know what is happening. The fire is burning you inside. There are some persons that when they are called upon to make a presentation, you just see them surveying the environment or giving the audience a smile. And somewhere at the back of your head, you're telling yourself that this person has a very beautiful smile. You don't know the fire that person is going through. That person is under so much fire. But sometimes people do all those things so they can be able to gain autonomy or dominance over the audience. All right. And this is something I personally practice. When I'm called upon to make a presentation, when I get up stage or if there's an elevated podium, I take a few minutes to smile at the congregation. And you see that they will give me that smile back. The moment I get that smile back, it creates a certain level of invincible relationship. It happens in my head though, right? Because I feel like if somebody smiles at you, then they accept you. All right. So I use that second to create a certain level of acceptance with the audience that makes me at ease and makes them receptive to what I have to say. All right. Now let me give you a little facial demonstration. If somebody wants to make a presentation and they give them their slide or they come up with their iPad or whatever they are using to make their presentation, and their face is like this. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marigold Okoye. I'm standing here today to let you know that impromptu presentation is an invaluable skill for every professional. In your dealing as a professional, you must understand that you cannot avoid the act of speaking in public. Whether you like it or not, speaking in public will always meet you, even if you decide to run. You've made your point. You've shared your topic. You've said something meaningful. But how did you receive me as a listener? How did you receive what I had to say? It felt weird. You're like, who is this? Who is this strange entity? Who is this person? You don't feel connected to me, right? But let me give you another instance. Now, I've been called to make a presentation on the same topic. And I come up stage. And the first thing I do is, there's just this smile. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. How are you all doing? So today I'm here to make a presentation titled Impromptu Presentation Mastery. First of all, before I begin, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever been in an impromptu speaking situation? How did you react to that? In as much as I know that impromptu presentation is an inevitable part of every professional's journey, I need you to understand that it is a skill that you can master. Which of them sounded better? Which of them looked better? In fact, the previous person had more points. The previous character had a lot of talking points. But how did you receive that person? All right. How did you receive the person? How did they receive what they had to say? Now, the other person, which is the other character, might have actually started with connecting with you by asking you, how did your day go? How are you doing? What knowledge do you have about this thing? It makes you more receptive. All right. Now, this is the same thing I'm trying to let us understand, that when you are trying to master the act of communication or presenting, always see the audience as your friend. The audience is not your enemy. Your only enemy is your internal pressure. Because sometimes people will say, look at their strong faces. They don't even like me. They're not your enemy. Your only enemy as a speaker or as someone who is communicating is your internal pressure. It makes you expand on the things that are not even there. All right. So let's go over to our slide, because I think we still have a couple of slides to go. Now, what is the 3 thinking question formula? All right. We've actually emphasized on this, so I'm just going to read through it. Now, the 3 thinking questions formula is question, main point, example. I told us that this class is going to be predominantly lavished with a lot of frameworks. All right. And now, what are frameworks? Frameworks are structures that you can use to simplify your speaking engagement or your speaking situation. I'll take that again. Frameworks are structures you can use to simplify your speaking engagement. All right. Now, what frameworks does is that it helps you sound more controlled. Without framework, it's easy for you to speak in oblivion. You can keep talking and ranting and you've not even made a single point. But with frameworks, it gives you structure. It shows you where to start from, where to infuse your main points, and where to end whatever you have to say. All right. Now, the 3 thinking questions formula is question, main point, example. Now, use the 3 questions to organize your thoughts quickly before speaking. First of all, understand the question. All right. The next thing is to choose your main message, then support it with a relevant example. I've actually dwelt extensively on these things, so that I will just read it through. Like I said, the first thing is what is being asked. What questions did they ask you? All right. Now, it says here that before speaking, first understand the questions clearly, or understand the question clearly. Now, identify the main topic and the kind of answer that is expected to avoid going off track. Like I said when I was explaining this whole thing, is that your ability to identify what you are being asked, that's the main question you are being asked, actually saves you from going off track. Most times we rush into making a presentation or trying to answer because we are under pressure, but that pressure actually makes us go off track. All right. Now, with the 3 thinking questions formula, it asks you, ask yourself, what is being asked? What are they asking me? All right. Now, I said here that you can start by asking yourself, what is the topic and what response is needed? Just because a topic sounds familiar doesn't mean that the response you want to give is necessary to the context at which you are being asked that question. I said, just because a topic sounds familiar doesn't mean that the response you want to give is relevant to the question that is being asked. All right. The goal is to avoid answering the wrong question. Now, the reason for all of these frameworks and these structures is that when you are able to successfully decode what you are being asked, it helps you avoid answering the wrong question. Nothing kills a professional faster than answering the wrong question to a question that persons are expecting a certain level of answer. They ask you what's happening in your team, and you start talking about what happened in 2024. This is 2026. In as much as the data as to what happened in 2024 might be relevant, but the context as to what they want to know is in 2026. So going back to 2024 is almost irrelevant at that time. All right. That is what this thing actually means, that you should ask yourself, what is the topic and what response is needed? Now, the goal is to avoid answering questions or answering the wrong question. All right. Now, this is the continuation. Now, the second thing is, what is my main point? Like I said, identify one key message you want your audience to remember. This helps you stay focused, avoid rambling, and deliver a clear response. Okay? When they ask you a question, what is my main point? If they ask you, what is, I used lunch the first time, the main response is, lunch is a meal you have just after breakfast, or lunch is the food you have in the afternoon. That is your main response. That is your main point. Now, you can now say, some people they have lunch and brunch. Some people skip lunch. All of those things are additional. But the main point is that you have defined what lunch is, and you've been able to let people understand that lunch is the meal you have in the afternoon, or is a meal you have after breakfast. All right. Now, in identifying your main point, you ask yourself, what do I really want to say? Okay. Now, the goal is to stay focused and avoid rambling, because the truth about all of these things is that if you do not mentally make a note of what you want to say, you would ramble. Rambling will become inevitable because you've not made a mental note of what you want to say. But if you successfully make a mental note of what you want to say, it helps you avoid rambling. All right. Now, the third point is what example supports it. Now, think of a simple example. It can be a story or a real life situation that explains your point better. All right. Now, examples make your answer clearer, relatable, and easier for your audience to understand. Now, for instance, when I was teaching about simplifying the concept, right, I told us a personal example of a speaking engagement I had with children who could not understand English. I pretty much understand, or I want to believe that when I used that real life example, it brought the subject matter home. Okay, in as much as we didn't take feedback as to if it really did, but I want to believe that just by using that simple example as to this was a situation I found myself in where I needed to go and speak to children, and I didn't do my due diligence by asking the convener who are my target audience and what am I supposed to expect from these persons, right? Just by using that example, we were able to have a clearer picture as to what simplifying the concept is, or rather how that example actually related to simplifying the concept. Okay, now you ask yourself, what real life example fits my point? I didn't in any of my slides write that when I'm talking about simplify the idea, I will now use this example. I didn't write it anywhere in this slide. There is no note on my table or my work desk. But just because I know that examples make your point sink better. When you are asked to make a presentation, or you are asked a question, or you're trying to think fast under pressure, once you identify or you ask yourself that you understand the question that is being asked and you know your main point, the next thing to do is to look for an example that easily makes your point more relatable to your audience, or that can easily sync this topic or this idea to the congregation. All right, people relate better with stories and with examples, and that's why you see that storytelling is one of the greatest forms of marketing in our digital economy, because people connect better to stories. When you're able to tell people stories, they can see themselves in that situation, and that is why people use stories a lot. Okay, now the goal is to make your answer clearer and more relatable. All right, so we've exhausted this slide. Now we'll go back to the next slide. How to think fast under pressure. All right, now I think that most of what is on this slide, I've already talked about it without using the slides, and that is why sometimes when you do these things repeatedly, you now learn how to master to teach without slides. But we create these slides so that in case you want to have your own personal study, or you want to have this documentation as to you've taken our course, but then somewhere in your professional growth you experience a speaking challenge and you need to come back to these things, just because we don't create notes, you can always use the slides to refresh your memory, or you go back to the video. All right, so these materials are always made available to us as a resource that we can always go back to even after the class ends. Okay, and that is why we always share links to access these slides, or access the document, or access the live training, so that after the 2 weeks gets exhausted, you can always come back to these materials. They are free forever, just because you are part of this class. All right, now how do you think fast under pressure? The first thing you need to do is pause before speaking. All right, take a few minutes to articulate your thoughts. We've talked about that. Now here we said start with what you know. All right, so we've not really dwelt on this, and I'm going to actually dwell on that, starting with what you know. All right, now when you are asked a question, or when you are faced with an impromptu presentation, or you're in a situation where you need to make a presentation and you are under tension, the first thing you need to do is to start with what you know. Okay, many people panic because they think they need expert knowledge, right? But you don't need to know everything. Okay, you don't need to know everything for you to be able to make a meaningful presentation. You don't need to have all the ideas in your head. Do you understand? So let's say, for instance, somebody asks you, what is your idea about teamwork. Okay, now you already know the overall concept of teamwork. You know what teamwork means. But when you've actually done your definition of teamwork and it looks like you still have enough time in your head, all right, you can start with a personal experience. For instance, you can say, I personally believe that teamwork actually makes the work work. You know, there is this addendum that people use: teamwork makes the work work, right? That's whole thing that they say that sounds like rhythm and rhymes. All right, so you can start with a personal experience. Okay, so maybe you have enough time on your hands, and let's say you are given like 5-10 minutes to make a presentation or to talk about something, and you're under pressure and you don't know where to start from. Start from what you know. Start from a personal experience. All right, so let's say, for instance, you are asked to talk about the disadvantages of not having difficult conversations. Okay, now I think I want to dwell on this because it is very important that we understand as professionals that having difficult conversations with your colleague, with your spouse, with anybody in your life is an inevitable part of your life. All right, now I'm going to relate that in the context of a team. They can ask you, oh, what is the disadvantage of not having difficult conversations as a professional? You can start with a personal experience. You can say something like, from experience, I've learned that the more you keep things in your heart, or the more you avoid having certain conversations, the more the work delays. When you say that, you've created a soft landing and you've been able to gather interest, right? People want to know what actually happened in your own experience. And now this is not the time where you have to share your life history or to talk about the colleague that kept malice with you for 1 year. But you have actually shared something that triggers interest. And interest is a currency that keeps people engaged. All right. When you tell people that, oh, from your experience, you have actually seen how not having difficult conversations has made the work delayed. People will lean in. They want to know, oh, really? That's interesting. Tell us more. Okay. Now, it depends on the congregation or if you are permitted to share detail. But the moment you start with a personal experience, you would realize that people's interests spike. They want to know what really happened. All right. Now, your ability to gain interest or to change the audience's reaction actually affects your own confidence as a speaker. Okay. So if you start with definition, you want to say things like, difficult conversations can be defined by Oxford Advanced Dictionary as the ability to sit down with someone who has insulted you to diffuse the insult. It sounds too serious. You might not hear people respond with, wow, not be smart thing. Do you understand? Because you have hit the audience with something that they are used to. People are used to definitions and big English. But the moment you start with a personal experience, the audience reaction changes. All right. Now, one thing you need to understand about audience reaction is that it has a way of affecting you as a speaker. Okay. When you go for an event and a speaker comes to share, they give the speaker 10 minutes to talk, and they use 2 minutes to talk about their personal life. People will bring down their glass and be looking at the speaker like this. Azal now, you know, Oga, go straight to the point. Now, what is all this? Right? So you have to do this in such an expert way that you gather the audience attention by starting with what you know. But you are actually doing this to be able to give yourself internal peace. All right? You are using your own personal experience to strengthen the audience reaction and reception. Because audience reception is actually a key form of communication and presentation continuity. A lot of people have lost their line of thoughts and ended up embarrassing themselves because the audience did not receive them, or rather the audience received them in a negative way. All right. So when the audience receives a person in a negative way, by default, it actually creates tension. All right. So if you weigh the audience and you look at their general disposition, you now have to ask yourself, if I start with introduction and definition, what reaction am I going to get from these people? Now, at an event or in any place where you are called to speak, always pay attention to the audience, because whatever their body language tells you is feedback. And feedback is part of the communication process. In fact, communication is not complete without feedback. All right? And your audience reaction is what gives you feedback as to what exactly are these people ready to hear at this time of the day. If you are at an event and you are the last speaker and 10 speakers have spoken before you, please, by all means, do not go there and start the way the previous 9 speakers started. No matter how brilliant your topic is, just because the audience are mentally exhausted, they will not receive you effectively. And that is why paying attention to your audience reaction is very important. Even in your office, let's say you are called to do annual reports, for instance, and so many persons have come to give their own idea. Internal auditors have audited, experts have done, they have talked, and out of 10 speakers, you are number 8. There's nothing you're going to say that they've not heard. All right? In as much as you might have 1 or 2 more things that might be different from what they've said, just because they are not mentally and emotionally ready to receive you, maybe because of exhaustion, or they've heard it repeated that no longer makes sense. The first thing you have to do as an expert speaker is to start with telling them something that makes their attention come back to the environment, because people can be in an event but they are no longer there. It happens to all of us. You can go for a tech event, because I enjoy going for tech events a lot, but towards the ending of the event, I can be sitting down at the event and my mind is not there again, because I've heard everybody is almost saying the same thing. So what makes you an expert communicator is your ability to look at what people have said and tweak your own, right? And that is where these things starts or come into play. Now, under pressure, you have actually surveyed the environment and you have decoded that these people will not receive me effectively. So what do? How do you make people receive you better? You start with a personal experience, or you use common sense, as an opening, something that is common sense. What is common sense? Let me give you an example of a common sense statement. You can start by saying, I do know that it is very natural for people to get tired at this time of the event. It's common sense. People might start laughing. People will say, as in, that's common sense. It doesn't change what you have to say. You have not shifted from everything you have to say. But under that pressure of audience reception, you need to ask yourself, how do I become more receptive? And now when you want to use common sense, you want to do something, or you want to say something that they can easily relate to. Just like what I said. All right? I know it's very easy for people to get tired at this time of the event. It's common sense, because it's very common for that thing to happen. And just because you've been able to create relatability, you can see the audience relax. The tension will reduce. Everyone is now, geared up to listen to this person that seems like they understand what we are going through here. 8 speakers, we are number 6. What do you think you want to say that the previous 4 have not said, or the previous 5 have not said? To the same audience, you can actually see that mentally they are exhausted, physically they are exhausted. But what makes you different under that pressure situation is your ability to start differently, all right? And that's what makes you an effective salesperson, the ability to always start differently. Now, simple observation, okay? Like I always say, observation is your greatest asset as a professional, not just as someone that is learning or trying to master the act of impromptu presentation or communication, but generally, your ability to observe things makes you a smarter person. It makes you a quick thinker. All right? If you are at an event, for instance, and probably you are the first speaker, the audience, their energy is high. They came with so much power. All right? But if you now start observing that, maybe for some reason, it has not gotten to your turn to make a presentation, or probably you didn't even know they were going to call you, and you get asked a question, just because you are present at that event, you should have actually observed the audience reaction to other speakers. And that is why they always tell you that experience is the best teacher. Don't let the experience happen to you before you learn from it. And that is where observation comes in place, all right? Your ability to observe how they responded to other speakers actually makes you know how to channel your own speaking differently. It also makes you know how to start better. It also makes you know how to end on time. So if they give you 10 minutes to make a presentation and you observe the congregation that these people are about to faint, please don't use the whole 10 minutes. Yeah, because in that 10 minutes, the truth is that you can actually be talking, but you're not communicating with them because they've checked out. They've checked out mentally. They've checked out. Some people will stand up and carry their bag and go, sir. It has happened to most of us. You go for an event and they are speaking. The event started by 10. 3 o'clock they are still talking. You just look at your time, not because, and sometimes you might even come to that event for a particular speaker, and from morning till 3 o'clock that speaker's turn has not reached. You just carry your bag and say, hey, John, let me go home, Jerry. What is this? Right? Because you have mentally checked out from the event. So that's where observation comes in place. If you are asked to make a presentation and you look at the congregation and you observe that these people are tired, don't go and exhaust the 10 minutes that is given to you. It will put you under pressure, because inside your 2-3 minutes, or even inside within 4 minutes of your presentation, they're already tired. They have already left. All right. So always leave a memorable impression with your audience. Always make it memorable. Always make your own presentation memorable. And making it memorable also entails simply observe the situation, cut down your own time, make it short and snappy, and you see the audience react to you differently. All right. Now, you can start with basic understanding. What is basic understanding? What do these people already know? What is very common about the topic? What is a general understanding about this? What do people know about this topic? All right. Now, the third point is use simple speaking structures. Like I said, frameworks are they are a full topic on their own. There are about 4 or 5 different speaking frameworks that we're going to be dissecting in our next class. So I always do not dwell on frameworks when I'm trying to, explain these points, so that there's no point dwelling on a framework when we already have a full class on these frameworks. Now, but it says here that frameworks helps the brain think faster. All right, by the time we start implementing and using these frameworks, you will realize that your brain starts thinking faster. Now, what are some examples of this framework? Like I said, there are about 4 or 5 of them. The first one is PREP. All right, the second one is past, present, future. All right, the third one is problem to solution. The fourth one is point, reason, example. Okay, these are frameworks that you use to think fast under pressure. Now, the conclusion here states that structure removes confusion. Your ability to think structuredly actually removes confusion. So I think we are about 19 minutes to the end of this class, and this is like a key or a few summary of what we learned. Now, what are the key lessons to remember from today's class? Pressure affects everyone. It affected me too. Anyway, pressure actually affects everyone. All right, so let's not look like it's new. Pressure is part of the experience. It's part of every speaking engagement. You must feel pressure. Now, fast thinking is a trainable skill. I said it when we started, that when you want to think fast under pressure, when you want to learn how to think fast, it is a skill. No one is born with the act of thinking fast. People practice these things and get better. Now, you do not need perfect answers. I also said it, that perfection is a killer. The moment you want to focus on being perfect, that is when you start making mistakes. That is when you start rumbling. That is when your line of thoughts you start losing your line of thoughts, because you are more focused on the outcome than the process. I know I dwelt extensively on learning how to focus on the process, not the outcome. All right. So please, if you missed Tuesday's class, you can check the group. The link to Tuesday's class was posted in the group. So just go and rewatch it, right? The ability to focus on the process and not the outcome. Most times as speakers, we try to focus on being perfect, that we leave the process. The more you focus on the outcome, the more you struggle with the process. All right. Now, I also emphasize that pausing is powerful. All right. We've talked about that. Now, we talked about structure reduces panic. I know we've only talked about structure in terms of points and, little here and there, but on Saturday, we're going to break down these structures in earnest. All right. Now, another thing to remember is improves clarity. Simplicity improves clarity. I told us that we should simplify the idea. Always try to simplify the idea. Whatever you are being asked, whatever questions you are being taught, simplify it. The more you simplify the question or the speaking situation, the better answers and better response you are able to give. Now, I also emphasized that confidence grows through repetition. All right. Confidence usually grows through repetition. Most persons who became excellent at any skill, they got excellent because they kept doing it. Communication is a skill. It is not talent. In as much as, yes, some persons can be naturally talented in terms of fluency and the ability to just have what to say or know what to say. But I'll tell you for free, as someone who actually grew in this skill, that confidence in any skill requires consistency, right? I cannot count how many certifications I've taken in communication. I've taken communication in terms of communicating in technical teams. I've taken communication in terms of PR and marketing. I've taken a lot of courses in communication just to get better at it. So whatever skill you're trying to master, and for this particular class, we're looking at impromptu presentation, it gets better with practice. And so please, even if we might have group activities either on Sunday or on Monday, because our next class after Saturday is Tuesday, and part of our learning experience is to ensure that the group doesn't stay silent for so long. So between Saturday's class and Tuesday's class, we might have an activity in the group. Please, when you see these activities, kindly participate in them. All right, this course was carefully designed to ensure that every learner has a holistic learning experience. It is our desire that at the end of this process, right, it is our desire that at the end of this process, you are able to get better at whatever it is that brought you or made you pay for this course. All right, sometimes when you invest money in a course, you're investing money to get better at a problem you identified and you want to solve. Okay, because most times, you know, when people pay for courses, they ghost the course. And you ghost a when you it's easy to ghost a course that you can go back and watch, and then you can get better at it. But when you ghost a practical course like this one, you know, in as much as you can watch these things, but because you're not part of it, it also feels like, oh, this trainer did not do justice to this thing, or this person did not exhaust this topic, or after you've paid for that course, you are still struggling with that thing. We always try to make sure that we become your final bus stop. Yes, that is our goal as professional trainers or as a training institute, that we become your final bus stop to any problem that brought you into our academy. And so this is why these activities are designed. And I also mentioned that you have 1 month free access to the academy. What does this mean? That after the 2 weeks you paid for is exhausted, we have live demo classes for 2 weeks, for 1 month. All right, so every Saturday we organize training scenarios, right? You can ask us questions, we can do practice with you. If you have an interview, you want to check your facial expression, you want to check how you sound, you want to perfect these skills before you go for the interview, that 1 month is where you can do it. And you also have access to ask questions. Whatever question you want to ask, you have access to it for 1 month. All right, so we have about 30 minutes for the class to end. But please, if you have not dropped your name in the attendance or in the chat box, please drop your name in the chat box. All right, and if you have any questions, I think that's the next slide. All right, I think that's the next slide. Next slide, we've come to an end of today's class, but the next slide is questions and answer. Okay, so if you have any question, you want clarity on anything, please feel free to ask. Today we didn't do any impromptu speaking because today's topic was quite a lengthy one. All right, today's topic was quite a lengthy one, and so we didn't have to start doing, you know, practical simulations and scenarios because of the topic we have for today. It was quite lengthy. You can see that without the speaking, you know, scenarios we used to do, we still exhausted 2 hours of teaching. That's because today's class was quite lengthy and we needed to exhaust that curriculum. But I can see Ademola Okunaya, good evening. Thank you for staying to the end of the class. I can see Tomiwa Oluwa. Hey, I have to put you on the screen. Please pronounce your name before I murder your name for. I'm so sorry. Good evening. Sorry, please pronounce your name for us. Hello, Mr. Tomiwa. Can you hear me, please? Oh, I don't know if you are in a place where you can speak, but please, if you can hear me, kindly pronounce your name. I don't want to murder your name. Sir?
Oluwatobi.
Okay, Oluwatobi.
Yes.
Okay, but I saw Oluwatob. I didn't see I. Maybe that's why I made a mistake. Oh.
Yes, that was a mistake. Oluwatobi.
I've been forgiven.
That was a mistake.
I'm so sorry. because I know that when I see Oluwatobi, there is I. So I didn't see the I. I was now struggling to pronounce it effectively. So I don't go and mutilate your name. All right. So that was the reason why I asked that. Okay, yeah, you've made the correction. Okay. Tomiwa Oluwatobi. All right, good evening and welcome. Thank you for staying to the end of this class. Although I think you joined a few minutes after the class has started, but it's good to have you in the class. All right. So please kindly put your names in the chat so that when we are rewatching, the reason why we ask that you write your name in the chat is that when we are rewatching for attendance, I can know that I mentioned these names and I saw them in class. All right. In as much as there's an attendance sheet that was dropped in the class, all right, please go back and fill the attendance. Yes, I'm seeing Angela Oguchi. Good evening. Thank you for staying till the end of the class. All right, please put your names in the chat so that I can know that I mentioned your name, because when we are watching the feedback or the live recording, I do not have access to see your names from the back end. Currently, I can see your names from the back end, right? I can see Ademola, I can see Angela, I can see Ani, eh? Aniekena Abasi, right? I know I can see that. I can see Mr. Aliyu. I can see Tomiwa, right? Now, the reason why we are pronouncing these names is when we watch the class, we cannot have access to this whole I can see. I cannot see them. I can only hear the names I mentioned and check the attendance, all right? And I do know that we've emphasized that attendance is a huge part of your certificate eligibility, because that certificate is, we have vetted that this person has been able to go from point A to point B with impromptu presentation, and we can say that they did that by coming to class. All right. It's just like when you call someone to be an eyewitness in court. You can only be an eyewitness to something you experienced. You cannot be an eyewitness to a scene you did not experience. And that is why we always ensure, or we always emphasize, that you please come to class and you are active as to the activities we are doing in class. All right. So I don't know if we have any questions. I'm going to be adding everyone to the stage so that if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask. Please, Mede Akin Nabasi, I'm so sorry, but it's showing that your device is not connected and I cannot add you to stage. I'm saying this just in case you have a question you want to ask and you might be speaking and I cannot hear you. Okay, so if you can exit and join back again, sometimes it can be network. I would check if it still repeats, because when I try to add you to stage, it is showing that your device is not connected. All right, and what this means is that you cannot ask questions. Even if you talk, we cannot hear you. All right, so please, for all the other persons who have added to stage, if you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask, because we have about 8 minutes for this class to end. We always emphasize on keeping to time. We do understand that each and every one of us here are professionals and we do not want to keep you beyond the time that is allocated to this class. So if you have a question, please unmute yourself and ask. We'll take questions for the next 5 minutes and we'll call it a close. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good evening. I have a question.
Yes, good evening. Please introduce yourself and ask the question. Thank you.
Okay. This is Ademola Okunaya, and I have a question. First of all, thank you for the lecture today. I learned quite a lot. I had before now, I had no idea that a lot of preparation and planning goes into impromptu speaking. So my question is, how you have over and over emphasized practice. So how do we practice to sharpen our skills in a way that mimics or replicates to a large extent the pressure you feel when you are put under an impromptu speaking position? Yes, you can practice, but I want to practice in a way that replicates or mimics that pressure you feel when you are under an impromptu speaking position. Thank you.
Okay, if I got your question correctly, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Ademola, for the feedback as to, you know, learning a couple of things from us. It is a pleasure that we exhaust some of these concerns. All right, so thank you so much for that feedback. Now, if I got your question correctly, you said that because we emphasized on practice, you are asking how do you practice in such a way that it mimics a real life speaking engagement, or the same amount of pressure that you feel in a real life speaking engagement, you are able to create that same experience for yourself. Am I correct? Mr. Demola, please, am I correct? I re-asked your question just to be sure.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't hear most of what you said. My network was acting funny.
Okay, I started by appreciating you for your feedback on our class. And then I asked that if I got your question correctly, right? You were asking, like, how can a person who is practicing impromptu presentation create the same pressure experience, even though you know that you are practicing? Am I correct?
Yes, yes, that is correct.
Okay, all right. So, before I answer that question, I need to teach us something about questions and responding. If we observe clearly that each time I'm asked a question, I actually say the question back to the person that is asking the question. This is a way of making sure that you answer the question that is being asked, that you're not answering off point, or you're not answering something else and the person is asking you something else. But that might enter one of our bonus classes or a different class. So let me focus on the question he asked. Now, if you're practicing and you're trying to create a real life speaking experience in such a way that you can generate the same amount of pressure, or sometimes a subtle amount of pressure that you would experience in a real life speaking engagement, start with your colleagues, persons who are not your family and they're not really your friends. Okay, now you don't need to come and tell them that I'm practicing impromptu presentation. All right, but sometimes you can put them on the spot and probably try to create a scenario with them. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say, but let's say, for instance, I'm trying to learn how to use frameworks. All right, and I have a colleague who is my team member. I can go and meet the person and say, guy, I want to ask you something. And the person can say, what is it? You can say, what is your thoughts about, the work we've done so far? The person will say, good work, but I think you need improvement on this area and that area. Now, when they give you that feedback, you will now use the feedback and respond to the person. How can you do such? Now, when they tell you that you need to improve on this and that, you can choose one of the frameworks in your head. Let's say if you are trying to use introduction, main point one, main point two, and conclusion, right? You can start with a simple introduction that can be, I really thank you very much for this feedback you've given. I mean, it's not really easy, but we thank God for it. Over the last couple of months, we've been trying to work on improving our sales from maybe 60,000 to 80,000. And for us to do this better, we've been able to integrate CRMs that helps us track customer conversion, right? This is one of the structures we are putting in place to be able to effectively handle this situation or effectively get better at this. Now, if you listen to my own presentation, you can see that I have actually practiced main point introduction, main point one, main point two, conclusion. Do you understand? So sometimes you may not necessarily feel the same depth of pressure, but you know what you want to achieve. So you have to start asking people questions that you can use their question or their response to practice these things. Okay, if you see my own response, you can see that I know that the reputation of my team was put under pressure because the person said we need to do better on this, and you are trying to look for a way to sell them what you have done and also practice impromptu presentation. Now you choose one of the frameworks that has already been taught in class, or one of the frameworks that will be taught in our subsequent classes, and now you use that framework to reply the person. This is you practicing. This is you practicing how to use frameworks. This is you practicing how to respond to questions. This is you practicing how to respond to subtle attacks, because the person did not praise your work. The person actually said you have room for improvement. All right. Now, without framework, a person can throw this thing at you and you become defensive. You say, are you not in this country? Can't you see what the economy is saying? How do you expect us to make progress when MD has refused to release money for us to run adverts? Even the advert we did serve. Nkechi, that is the person that is in charge of sales and marketing, is very, very slow and redundant. You give her a task, she'll spend 3 hours doing the task. You are talking, but you're not making any point. You're not showing progress. You're actually talking from a place of defense. You're actually making the person feel like you're being defensive. But that's not how experts behave. As an expert, you have your integrity to defend, you have your reputation to protect. Especially if you're a team lead or you're someone who is in a managerial position, you know that this person is trying to puncture tires in your own professionalism, and you respond to them with something they can use as a yardstick to measure the progress that you have made. All right. So this is you practicing the framework that we taught yesterday, which is introduction, main point one, main point to conclusion. All right, without you necessarily telling the person that you are practicing this thing. In that moment of you trying to respond, you are actually under pressure, because you know that whatever answer you give to this person can invariably affect the way your reputation is being seen as a team. All right, so I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that is the most logical way to get this done in the shortest possible time and still not lose your line of thought. Mr. Demola, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. So please, does anybody have any other question? Do you have any other question? So just in case your own question is still on practice, right? You can practice with your colleagues. You can practice with your team members. You can practice with yourself. But you can even practice with your family. I know that during our introduction/onboarding, right, I told us about how that when I was learning how to get better at communication, I'll take a course, and whatever they teach me in class, I'll go and ask my parents to ask me questions. And when they ask me questions, I use their feedback to improve, right? I use their feedback to work on what I've already learned or get better at what I was taught in class. All right. So if your question is still on practice, I've given us audiences that we can use that might mimic a live audience. Okay, sometimes you might not necessarily wait till when you are in a live speaking situation, as to maybe you are called as one of the speakers or you are called as a team lead representing your team. You can actually create these situations just to make sure that you are internalizing these frameworks and you are getting better at everything that we are learning or we are being taught in class. So we are 1 minute after 9 p.m. I don't know if anybody has any questions. We can just take one more question and we'll call it a day for today. So please, if you have question, kindly unmute yourself and ask the question, please. Okay, so I don't know if we have questions, but please, if you are still thinking of the question, you can drop it on the chat and we will call it a day. Please, by our next class or by tomorrow, we are going to be dropping our feedback form. All right, so there's something called our feedback form. We use it to gather feedback as to what you have experienced in the course and areas of improvement. All right, we do believe that you have 4 classes to go, so whatever feedback you give us, we can use it to improve the learning experience. All right, what do you want us to do better? What can we do better? And then if you feel like we have done justice to the class so far, we would be more than grateful to receive your reviews. All right, also we'll also be dropping the link to our social media pages at the end of the class, or probably the next day. We might drop like a little snippet or a summary on our social media page. And if you were in class, please engage with our post. Tell the world what you've learned or what you're learning. It helps us reach a wider audience because we're just a brand that is building. We've done a lot behind the scene, but we just decided to create an online presence this year and focus more on building online. And every feedback, every positive comment, every review you give actually helps us get better. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, as always, we sincerely appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of this journey with us, for coming to class, for staying through the process, and for getting better at this with us at the Law Academy. We do not take your presence here for granted, neither do we undermine anyone's professionalism. I do understand that each and every one of us are professionals in different aspects of life and different spheres of life, and we do not underestimate your qualification. And as always, we treat you with the highest level of self-esteem and respect that is due you at your workplace and your professional endeavors. We always appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of this. And so with no further ado, we would like to call today's class to a close. Once again, we thank you and we say bye-bye. Bye.